All right. Welcome everyone. My name is Dimitri Broxton and welcome to In the Artist Studio. While we allow folks to log in, and we'll put this in the chat as well, please let us know where you're joining us from in the chat box.
Thank you.
Oh, I love it.
Well, this is a new kind of torture. Yeah.
Oh, and then I should also.
Somebody from Silver Spring, Maryland.
Oh, okay, there we go.
That's my face.
It's your face. We get to see you twice.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Somebody from Redwood City. Hello.
Hi.
Anha from, yes. Elizabeth. Hello.
I thank you all who have been joining us week after week. It's so great to see you. I just love to see familiar names and locations. It's really been awesome. And I think we've been doing this since mid-March, and my math is very bad onto how many weeks that's been. But it just keeps getting better and better every week. It looks like we're starting to, the logins are starting to slow down, which is great. So I'll go ahead and get started. So I'm gonna start off by welcoming everyone. Again, my name is Dimitri Broxton. I am the Senior Director of Education at Museum of the African Diaspora, and this is In the Artist Studio. I'm very happy to be joined with Barbara Earl Thomas today. And just as a reminder, though MoAD's physical building may be closed due to the mandatory shelter in place here, you can still get your fill of art and Artists of the African Diaspora every single Wednesday at 1:00 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Please join MoAD staff members as we visit some of our favorite artists in their studios to see what they're currently working on and how their work is changing as a result of the current pandemic. Thank you so much, Jose. It's a rare opportunity for us to join artists in their studio, hear from them, and then I just want to remind everyone that we end each session with a Q&A. So as we go through the session today, if questions pop up for you, please type them into the Q&A box if you are joining us through Zoom, and we'll get to that as soon as possible at in the last 15 to 10 minutes of the talk today. This series was made possible by a generous donation by the Westridge Foundation, MoAD members, and viewers like you. Thank you so, so much. We really appreciate all the support and allowing us to continue this program for the rest of this year. Today's talk is co-presented with Claire Oliver Gallery in Harlem, New York City.
Yay,
I'm gonna read, hey Claire. I'm gonna read a couple statements for us before we get started and before I introduce Barbara. MoAD stands in solidarity with Black Lives Matter. We honor and mourn the senseless murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Tony McDade, and so many others who have lost their lives at the hand of police brutality and racial injustice, including those whose names we do not know. Also, a land acknowledgement. So as many of us are settlers, immigrants, or descendants of those forcefully brought to this continent, our institutions were founded upon exclusions and erasures of the indigenous peoples whose lands we're located. With deep respect, MoAD acknowledges that even in the virtual space, our people, our work, and our network servers are on native lands, and we thank the indigenous peoples of the Bay Area who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. Barbara Earl Thomas is a Seattle-born writer and visual artist with national exhibits to her credit. She draws on her personal history between the American South and the Pacific Northwest, and her works are included in the Seattle Art Museum, Tacoma Art Museum, Portland Art Museum, Microsoft, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, as well as Washington State and Seattle City Public Collections. She received the City of Seattle Mayor's Art Award, the Governor's Art Award, the Artist Trust Twining Humber Award, and the Stranger Genius Award for Excellence in the Arts. Additionally, Thomas is a social and cultural activist who was instrumental in the creation of the Northwest African American Museum. She received her BA and MFA from the University of Washington. She has upcoming exhibits at the Seattle Art Museum in 2020, and we'll talk about those, and the Henry Gallery in 2021. She is represented by Claire Oliver Gallery in New York City. Welcome, Barbara.
Thank you for having me. It's so exciting.
Yeah, I'm really, really excited. I feel like I want to thank Claire for introducing me to you, first of all. And then the more that I started digging into your work, the more I get excited. And I'm just really excited to be able to go through this with you today. I want to start off by showing a very brief video that you shared with me of you working, so folks can get a quick understanding of what your process is like. So let's see, technology. Again, we want to thank the Westridge Foundation. And let's see. Such a meticulous process. I am really, 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 really glad that you shared that with us. And I'm also really excited to see that piece that you were just working on is right behind you right now.
Yes, there you go. I probably will. It's a piece. It's a process that really is. I've developed from having been a printmaker and then and also having worked in glass, trying to get that same feeling when you are working on something that's in paper, to make it have that glow, to make it have that dimension of people. When they look at the work in a photo, they're always asking me, is it glass? Is it, backlit? And I said, no, it's actually the paper that, in conjunction with, the black I cut it from, that creates that kind of dimensional look. And I think as artists, what we are is we're problem solvers. We set a problem for ourselves and we go like, how can I solve that in a way that gets me the result that I'm looking for? And I think that's part of why I think artists are so important right now at this time and moment in our history, because we've got many problems to address and many to work out.
You're so right. We have a mountain of problems to work out. And I think it's also really helpful for people to see how meticulous you are in your process. You don't just make a cut and say, okay, this is great. You're going in and making these micro cuts to make these amazing pieces that we see, or that we will see in a while, but also what we see behind you. And how did you come about this process? I'm really interested to know how you came about paper or paper cutting as kind of your core medium.
Well, it's interesting because it actually came by way of working in glass. And I started with printmaking. I'm a painter, actually. I've painted a lot with egg tempera, which is another very demanding medium. And there's no fast way to go about it. But when I got a residency, a really short residency at the Tacoma Glass Museum in 2013. And I thought, well, it was a residency that was basically for people like me, people who are not glass artists, but who want to kind of delve into something that is not their medium, but work with people who are experts and then come in and you know, see what you can do. So it was like, okay, I'm going to go down there and I'm going to do something. I didn't even know, but they said, bring sketches. And right away, you realize when you get in the room with some people who are experts at what they do, and they're asking you what you want, you've got to get in there and take a few chances and start trying to figure out what your part is in the dance. Because it's kind of like being in a pickup band. You've got the gaffers and you've got the people that are blowing, you got the people that are spinning, and you got the 11,000 degree oven that's baking your face. And you realize, you know what? I just have to think really fast, unlike what I'm able to do right now because I feel so foggy with the confinement we have. But I got in there, and the reason I love glass, that I was attracted to do this very scary thing, was because glass is about light. It's about conducting light. It's about showing light. So in my paintings, I've always been trying to figure out how to make the light appear to be coming from the painting itself. So after I did that, I got back to my studio, and here I was in the studio without all those wonderful expert glass blowers, without all those, you know, all those ovens. And I said, I want to make that same light thing happen. So I started cutting paper and shining light through it, cutting paper and shining light through it. And then I thought, maybe I can try to create that with, you know, with color and contrast. So that led me to actually start to think about the cutting and revealing. And it is a very exacting kind of work, but it really fits my personality, which is kind of a little bit anal retentive, you know, and it's a control thing, but the goal is not to have people tormented in terms of like when they see it. If I've succeeded, people don't say, my God, how long did it take you to do that?
They don't, wow.
They'll look at it and they go like, oh my God, that looks like stained glass, or oh wow, that looks like, because then they're able to like not be labored. For me, going into a museum or going into a gallery and I see a print, and if it has 16 colors, all I start to do is try to figure out, my God, they registered all those colors, and how did they get it registered, and how did they, so I try to not have the viewer, well, you're burdened because you're an artist, so you're going to be thinking that, but hopefully for other people that are in our audience, they won't be thinking that. So, so that's what got me to doing the cut paper. And also it was something I could do. Although in my mind, I knew what the effect I wanted, but I was trying to figure out how to make that work. So having the paper and having the things behind it, and when people look at it, it's really just paper. It's not anything else. It's just paper. And I think that's what we do. That's part of the magic and the alchemy in terms of the creative process, is putting things together that don't necessarily always seem like they should go together to make something that hasn't quite been made before. So that's how I got there.
And now remind me, so you are a Seattle, you are I forgot what you said earlier, but I'm gonna say Seattle native. And so, you know, with that, you know, Seattle as kind of maybe outside of Venice being kind of the glass capital of the world, was that a motivation for you to go into glass, or was it something, is it because, you know, we've got Chihuly and we've got all these famous glass people.
We have Chihuly, we have lots of famous, and we have just, you know what, I like, I won't say that it encouraged me to go into glass, but it's been around me. I have really good cohorts, co-artists like Cappy Thompson and people like that. There's something about the glass community, they're very generous. They're very generous people. And also because it is very collaborative, it really is a way you can step in and people immediately start to try to help you. And my biggest problem was not to be overhelped. That was my biggest problem, was not, and to not to get, you know, when I went to Pilchuck, which is the art colony that Del Chihuly helped to start,
okay.
as well as the Tacoma Glass Museum. And, you know, it's a place where you can go, you can sample all kinds of, you can fuse, you can do glass etching, you can do all kinds of things. And when I went, I had gone to the Tacoma Glass Museum, and then I had these vessels that I wanted to finish. So when I went there, everybody was going, well, oh, you can fuse, you can do this. I said, I'm not here for the smorgasbord, but I need a focus.
Sure.
Because I want to finish the project that I started at the Tacoma Glass Museum, and people were just really excited, and I just threw myself in. And also it was one of those things where if I had known just a little bit more, I might have thought I could do all this by myself, but luckily I didn't know much. So I was truly dependent on the knowledge and the kindness of the people that I was working with. So we got in there, and I brought my designs and my drawings, and what I asked the people at Tacoma Glass Museum, I said, well, you see how I work. And I showed them my prints, I showed them my paintings, and I said, how do you think I could best work with the glass vessels that we create here? And they said, oh, you can do engraving. And you know, that's the tool. I said, I don't have enough life left to do that. I'm not going to be an engraver. But then they said, you can also do sandblasting. So that's where I took my glass work to. I would take the vessels, wrap them in Frisket, cut, and then sandblast. And that's how I would get the images onto my glass. And that was perfect for me, because it was like printmaking in a way. It was like cutting paper. You wrap it, reveal, sandblast, and all of a sudden you have an image on the glass that was not there. And it is your image. It's not, you know, nobody else had to do it for you. So I was very interested in wanting to actually have my hand in the work.
Sure.
Yeah, so that's what I did. And it very much relates to the paper cutting.
Yeah, and we're definitely going to get to some of those. I have some images I'll share of your glass work in a while, and I'm excited about that. I'm excited about how many forms of media and processes and styles of work that you create. We don't see that very often with an artist, or I don't at least. And if an artist goes into multiple directions, they're oftentimes is not as masterful as you are with the different materials. I want to kind of go back into, there's a question I ask every single artist is, you know, what got you started into creating art? And then when was that moment that you realized that you wanted to be a professional artist?
You know, the moment I started, I come from a family, I think I told you, my family, I'm the first generation in my family born outside of the South, outside of Louisiana, Texas, and Alabama. And so when my family came here in the 40s and the 50s, you know, people did a lot of making of their own stuff, you know. I was making things from the time I was quite young. You know, we would sit down and those were the really olden days. And so my mother would give me a pillowcase, and then I would embroider. I would just embroider. I mean, because we were decorating things we were going to use. So it wasn't art. It was like, oh, well, here, you can do this, embroider the pillowcase. And one of the things my mom did, and which I think still informs me today, she'd take the piece that I'd be embroidering, you know, whether it was a silk, you know, the satin stitch or the cross stitch, and she'd take it. And after I'd say, oh, mommy, look at this, she'd look at it, and then she'd flip it over. Look at the back. And she said, you know, the back has to look as good as the front. And so I learned right away, it wasn't just what you show to the user, but in fact, it's the whole and how things are put together. So it's not just about how the final product, It's how you get there in the economy. So you don't take a stitch from this side and do a stitch way on the other side. You kind of are planning out the whole way your journey to finish the flower or whatever it is that you're making. And I think I took that very much into kind of my life. And I did things like I had trains, I built airplane models and all kinds of things like that. And I loved that. So I was always building something. And I think there was one point where my mom would come home every day from work. My mother was a mother out of the house. From the time I came in. So she was
very
not
modern woman
making cookies and all of that kind of stuff. She'd come in and when she'd walk in the door, I would have drawn something for her. And I give it to her. And there was something about, she'd go, oh, that is so wonderful. And so I realized it just made her so happy. At least she pretended to be happy, even if she wasn't. And I thought, I'm going to make her look like that every day.
Wow.
And so I would make her. So my art, to say this, it started out as a gift to my mom. And then as things unfolded, I did go to university, never expecting I would go to university, and never had an idea that people majored in art. Who majored in art?
Yeah.
But I was good at making things. So while I was taking all these other classes, I'd go over and take things in the art school. And finally, it just appeared that I had all these credits. And someone said, are you an art major? I said, you can major in this? And so, because up to that point, I told everybody I was going to be a physical therapist. And I actually didn't know what it was. But it made everybody do just like what you did.
They're just like, wow.
Wow. And then so I ended up being and I never thought of it so much as I'm going to make a living, but I thought I'm going to always make things. So I might as well, as long as I'm here, major in something that I really like. And so that's what I did. And it's turned out.
So kind of, you brought up your family, which so many of us who are African-American living on the West Coast, we have roots in the South. And so, what role did your family's, history and they're taking up the move during the Great Migration to the West into the Pacific Northwest. How has all that had an impact on you and your work?
Well, I think that one of the curators asked me about that, and really it's how come I am a storyteller, because I come from a whole line of people who, there were stories, there could be lies, they could be tall tales. There could be ways to figure out how to get your kids to do the thing that you wanted them to do that they're resisting doing, by giving them sort of this tale that this is what's going to happen to you if you don't do the thing that I'm telling you to do. So it was the way we were raised, by these stories and these admonitions and these sort of, I will say truly, sometimes they came like threats, but you didn't want whatever that thing was to happen to you. And I think that also because my parents were, especially my mom, she was my relative, she was quite superstitious in sort of ways. And so like if we had a storm or anything, she'd make us all get in the bed. My dad, my sister, and me, we had to get in the bed and we have to be really quiet, because for her, in her mind, was like, we could get struck down in our house if the lightning came through the ceiling. I don't even know, but I got in the bed because it was a pleasant thing to do. And we'd just all be there. And my mom would tell stories. And I think that was just a natural way for me to see the world through her eyes and through my dad's stories. And so when I talk about the firmament, when I talk about the things that seem to be whirling around me and above me and the things I actually see, it's because those visions were put there from the stories that I was told by, all the people around me.
I love that. I'm going to get into one more question before we start looking at your work and talking about specific pieces. But I've read on several places that you had an incredible mentor and professor in Jacob Lawrence. And so I'm sure everyone asks you this all the time. I'm sure it's something that stays with you, but he was your undergraduate professor and graduate advisor at the University of Washington. Can you tell us when you first met him and the influence that he had upon your art making?
Well, I don't mind talking about Jacob at all, because Jacob, he's now bigger than life in the world. But for me, he was this gentleman that came into my life in about 1974, 75, when he came to teach at the University of Washington. And I tell the story, I was in a drawing class, and I was drawing, and then someone came up to the room and they said, "You're wanted down in the office, the arts office." And I was like, oh my God, my mother ill? Is somebody sick? And I went down to the office, and there was Mr. Dunthorne. He was the head of the art school at that time. And then there was this Black gentleman who was well dressed, because I thought he looked we're in Seattle, we're REI.
Yeah.
We're not really well dressed hardly ever. And there he was, and he's sitting there very kind of sedately. And so the head of the school, he said, "Barbara, I'd like you to meet Jacob Lawrence." And I said, "Hello." And he said, "Hello." And I looked at him, and I looked at Mr. Dunthorne, and I looked at I think it was one other person in the room. I'm going, okay. I'm like 21 or 20. I don't know how old I am, 20, but I'm not very old. I'm looking, I said, we're colored. We're two Black people. So I guess the Black people need to meet. So the thing, I said, are they going to call me down every time they find somebody Black? I don't know. But I met him, and I went back up to class. I did not know who he was.
That is incredible.
I didn't know why I was meeting him, except that he was going to be a new professor. And at that time, it was during a lot of unrest. And so they were bringing on faculty in response to that. And Jacob, that's how I met him. And later I realized, I figured out who he was because I went to visit Washington, D.C., and I went to the National Gallery, and there was some of his work. I came back to Seattle, and I went to his office, and I said, "You know what?" He says, "What?" I said, "You've been holding out on me." And he said, "You're famous." I said, "You're famous because I saw your things." And so I said, "If there's anything else you need to tell me, you need to tell me now. No more secrets." And it was really great. I mean, he was a wonderful teacher. He was one of these kind of people. He was important to so many people's lives. And he was a kind of instructor who loved to teach. And you could tell that he loved to teach. And for me, his way of teaching was also like about a way of life. And I will say that in watching Jacob throughout his whole life, and Gwendolyn, his wife, what they taught me, in as much as, how to mix a color, was how to survive for the long haul. How that if you're in it for the long haul, it's not just for the moment, it's for the everyday. And up to the time Jacob died, I mean, 2-3 days before he died, he was like, I really need to get back to the studio. So his work was always on his mind, and he was never, it was never far from his thoughts. And I feel like it was a way of life, and he didn't wear it like a badge. It was just part of him. So he wasn't like Jacob Lawrence this or Jacob Lawrence. He was just all integrated. And I feel like that was a really good lesson and a really good experience to have with someone who I know weathered the storms of being extremely popular at some times, and then all of a sudden his star would kind of fall. He'd be down there, and his star would rise. And luckily for him, as he got older, his star continued to rise. So by the time his life had finished, his star was quite high. And that's why you know about him. And that's why many people know about him, because he didn't have to be rediscovered. So part of my job is to just walk in rooms and say his name and see who knows about him, and if they don't, then I pull them aside and I tell them. So there you go.
That's very kind of be like, how do you not know who Jacob Lawrence is?
Trust me. And it
Yeah,
doesn't take long to be forgotten. So
That's very true. That's very true. I don't know if I would have the same thing. I feel like I've known him my whole life, so I would have been starstruck, and he would have been like, I don't have time for you.
He would have time, yeah.
I have one more question, because I guess I kind of lied about jumping into it. But you briefly in the bio and at the beginning of the talk, you briefly mentioned your involvement with the Northwest African American Museum. I'm always really interested in artists. As I was sharing with you before, oftentimes the artists don't work within the arts. For one, but definitely not within the context of a museum. And if artists do work in the context of a museum, they're not the deputy director or the executive director of a museum. So I just want to know, with that whole process of you wearing those dual hats as an artist, like how did you maintain yourself as an artist? And did maybe on the flip side of that, did your role as someone who ran and established an entire museum, did that impact your art?
I have to say it was the hardest job I ever had. And I was going to say before that, I coordinated worked with an arts for a big festival called Bumbershoot. That was a huge job, huge. But then I did this, and this job was hard because it was being created as I stepped in. And so it was like building a small company. And at the beginning of anything, even if you're building your own art world, you give it 125%. And the young people that I worked with gave it 125%. So it was hard, and I'm sure it still is hard for people. And the museum was 100% nonprofit. So that means we were not a line item of any city, county, or state budget. All the money of, the $1.2 or whatever the budget is now, I don't know, was raised by going out and asking for the dough. And realizing that was what you had to do in order to pay the 5 or 6 people that were on the payroll. And I learned early on that for me, it wasn't so much about the museum as it was maintaining my team. And because they're the ones that made the museum, I was in no way pretending like I was doing a job that allowed them to do what happened in the museum. And my job was not to curate. It was not to do any of those things except raise the dough and to keep the team together. And so I learned a lot about what it means to manage people, to get what is best out of them, and to hire people that are way smarter than you and let that be okay. Because I needed people that were way smarter than me and way younger than me, and willing to take a chance. And I got all those people around me, and we were able to do that for the community. I mean, I feel like I could have probably lived my whole life. I had lived most of my life without an African American museum, but it was a community that wanted it. And my goal was just to say, you know what, people do this. We can do this. This is how it's done. And this is how it's done. And this is how you maintain fiscal responsibility. This is how you pay people. This is how you get them benefits. This is how you open the door. This is how you greet people, And, and when people weren't happy, I took the flack. But you share the light, None of those things are ever a one-person deal. And that's what I do here in the studio. I have people work with me in the studio. Before COVID, I had at least 5 or 6 cutters per week coming in with me here in the studio. And I just sort of took that mode and did that at the museum.
Okay.
Said, this is how I do it here. And also I understood that you have to not, you can't start at the top of the pay scale. You start at where the money is. And that's what we did. And I have to thank all those young people, whether it's, Brian Carter, Lelani Lewis, Chieko Phillips, all these people that work with me, who were right out of school, right out of school, who came in and just said, oh boy, we're going to have a party.
This is well. I mean, everything you said is clear and a clear indication that you are and were an amazing leader. How did taking on such a gigantic role impact the production of your artwork? Did it change what you did? Did it change your ability to be an artist? Also,
oh, that's how I ended up doing my block print. I would be so exhausted at the end of the day, but I dragged myself in here and I said, I can't paint right now, but I have to be able to do something. So I got a block, and my really good friend, I don't know if you know Daniel Mentor, you should talk to him sometime. He's in Portland, Maine. And he says, Barbara, you should do block prints. And I had a block and I had these tools that I bought that I hadn't used. And he did this thing where he cut out the front of a boat. And he used 5 tools, and he used 3 tools. And then he left, and I thought, I had that. I pulled it out. I said, I think I could maybe handle doing a block print. And so I started doing these block prints. I'd come in, and they were immediate. I had to commit, take the knife, cut, can't overthink it. And then I just said, something simple. So I started doing this whole series called, it was all about, going to the fishing, because my family moved here. All we did was go to the fishing. And I want to go to Disneyland, they go to the fishing. I want to go do something like Playland, no, they go to the fishing. So we were always fishing. So I did a whole series on fishing.
I'm gonna pop that up in just a second. We're gonna go back,
there's one of my night crawlers and earthworms. And the story behind this was that when we lived on this in the central area here in Seattle, my dad worked for the park department, and he would water one of the parks he worked in, which was volunteer park. And then he'd load all the kids in the back of his car, and he'd take us all to the park with flashlights and little containers, and then we'd find worms. And our job was to make sure that we didn't pick up dog crap or a slug, because that's the fear you have of rolling around on the ground. And as I'm down on the ground, I'm thinking, which one of us is the night crawler? I mean, and so we would take those night crawlers back, and then, on Friday, then we'd all get in the car and go to catch the perch, the crappie, the rockfish, the bluegill, the whatever. And as a result, I don't eat a lot of those kind of fish anymore, because that's what we ate all year long. And so this was one of the very early ones in my book of fishing that I did.
I love it, and I love the connection with the South. Like, when I talk to family in the South or from the South, it's just such a shared experience for folks, and everyone has their different ways of, no one goes to the tack and feed shop. You go get your own. Well, who just goes and buys them.
And I always thought it was just disgusting, because we'd put them in dirt, and then we would put a top on them, and we'd put them in the refrigerator so that they
to keep them fresh.
Idea that they were going to crawl out and get in the butter, and they were going to be in the casserole. So I'm checking that refrigerator to make sure that the night crawlers had not escaped. So this is one of the ones, and you could see, you have your tool, and you can see how they're related to my paper cuts. I mean,
exactly.
It's just the same thing. And you see behind is I have the printer do kind of a graded roll, which is kind of a rainbow roll, and then I would do the cutting, and then we print on top of the graded roll. So there's this sense of kind of a shade going from deep to light toward the bottom.
I want to jump into your practice a little bit and go back. So now I'm going to go back, because you were talking about that one. So I definitely want to go back. And you're a you are also a painter. And not only are you a painter, but you're a very gifted and talented painter. This work is gorgeous. I really love the whole how you just didn't have time to paint anymore. You said you were working in, was it oil tempera?
This is egg tempera. So
Egg tempera, okay.
Yeah, so you use the yolk of the egg mixed with a little stand oil or linseed oil, then hit it with a little vinegar and water, and then you take that and mix that with your pigment. And it's sort of very much a Renaissance medium where they used to do that as underpainting for their frescoes and things like that. And I loved it because it made the paint a little fatter. It's a water medium, but it's fatter. But I think I mentioned also that the way you apply it is in these very thin layers. And so you're looking down through the color. And so it has this very rich body to it. And this is from my series, Red-Winged Blackbirds and Red-Winged Black Boys. And I did a whole series, which actually is in my drawer in here. I am still kind of working on it. I'm always working on it. So this was one of the pieces from there.
That's amazing. And I know this is a later one. I guess I will quickly show one of your earlier paintings.
Yeah.
And yeah, so another one of the reasons why I just think your work is so fascinating, because although this is paint, when I'm looking at you right now and I look behind you and I see the paper cut, I can see the connection.
Yeah.
Two different media entirely. But you have an aesthetic that crosses over your use of color, your use of light and shadow, and the movement that you convey.
And I think that's the point. I feel like I read this book early on. It's been Sean, The Shape of Content. And I think that I pick a medium because it's the best one to express the idea that I have at that moment. If something's better expressed in paper cut, there's no reason to paint it. If something's better expressed in glass, there's no better reason to paper cut it, if I have the skill to do that thing. And the one thing I will say, it doesn't matter how many media or ways of materials I can use. If I'm not doing a good job of it, it doesn't matter. So that's what I keep in mind. And so there are things that, I say to Claire, I said, I can't wander off into that field because I actually don't want to have one more thing. I have to learn from the beginning to the end. And I've got a lot of places in glass and a lot of places in paper cutting that I really can still go and expand my method of making, because it's the method of making. And I write so that, because it's something that might be better said in words than in image. So I try to take myself with me when I wander around and through the different media.
Take yourself with you. I love that. So I guess
another one of the prints that I was making when I was trying to be the director of something, and this is called The Reading Room. And I'm a book person, so I just put the things in my images that I love, and I love books and I love reading, and I think that I'm a book pusher, and so everywhere I go, if I see young people, or I always ask people, what are you reading? And what are you paying attention to? What's caught your eye and what's caught your heart? And how are you working with that right now?
I love the stories in here. And then as I watch, look at images like this, I can't help but conjure Jacob Lawrence and his series, the movement of the figures, the storytelling, and I love that you're connecting to your early childhood memories of, sheltering together with the storm. And, you have all these elements that I noticed that find their way throughout your work. There's always a fire, or fire frequently shows up in some fashion, or a flood, or these urban settings that are moving, and we'll go through. Oh, I'm jumping to another series. We'll get there in a second. But can you talk about some of these stories that you carry with you through your work?
Well, a lot of these stories are things that I grew up with. I grew up with my grandmother reading the Bible and coming out and sort of casting us into hell because we've been misbehaving all day, and and the devil's gonna get us, and it just was like, and I actually believed every single word of it. So it was like, okay, I gotta shape up, or else there's gonna be some bad stuff happening. And and as I grew up and I read mythology and all of that, it all converged. And so the truth is, when I look out into the world, this is what it looks like to me.
Wow.
This is what it looks like to me. And even though it's calm and very, sort of tranquil here in my space, all this is happening somewhere. Someone's having, their house blown down. Someone is in the middle of water inundating them. Someone somewhere is, there's a fire on the other side of the hill. These things are happening everywhere. And so I feel that. And the stories that, the way you were able to learn about it, you see right here in the piece, there's a fellow with a child and they're reading the book. And in the reading room, I say, when you open the book, all these things start to happen. Maybe you're in a really quiet room. As soon as you open the book, all this stuff that's happening around this child starts to happen because the book lets it out. And you learn about what's happening elsewhere. And I think in this piece, I might usually have a cock crowing somewhere in the corner.
It's probably, I think we're covering it with our photos.
Those are stories. And also people who have read mythology, or they've read the Bible, or they can go through and they can pick these things out. And that means that the image tells them something different than it tells someone who doesn't have those references. And I'm not pushing any kind of, ethos or anything. I'm just saying, these are the things that are in my world. And I put them all together and make a new story, and people find themselves in the story. I don't have a direct narrative I'm telling them. They tell me. People walk in and they tell me. I said, oh yeah. They said, you see how that's happening? That's exactly what's happening to me. I said, you're right. That's happening.
I love how the work reaches so many different people in different ways, and and I think your move into public art is something that offers many more people the opportunity to see themselves and to connect with your work. How did you end up getting into public art?
Well, I had this idea that my paintings and the things I made were bigger. Really, that they were monumental, even though I was doing them in these very small, kind of very intimate tableaus. And as you probably know, to get into public art, you have to prove to people that you can actually make a big thing. And so I kept saying, I really think that, my designs and my storytelling would be really good in a big format. And also I wanted to do big things. And I thought, I can't just do big things and just put them in my backyard. I need a place for them to land. And I need a place for them to be, so that I can push myself to problem solve into how I would fill a particular space. This is called the Story House. And it's sort of made like a altar book. So it's made like if you opened up an altar, and it's a space inside. And I thought people could meet there. It would be a good wayfinding place. Meet me at the Story House. And there are benches in there that I took ready-mades and I redesigned those so that they have these little mandalas on the side. And I wanted it, of course, to be able to be read from across the courtyard. So this is at Evergreen State College, and it's on their campus there.
And so I'm assuming you had to work with a team of fabricators for this, because I
went out and found
it's metal.
Yeah, I went out and found a blacksmith, and then I did all the designs, and the blacksmith helped me problem solve to figure out how to actually make the piece. And I was the general, so I had to go out and find out how to do every piece. I don't like being the general, but I can be the general. So I went out and found out, and then we took the piece in a truck, and then had a forklift, and we assembled it right on the spot.
Oh, wow.
It was crazy. I'm not going to do that again, but I can do that. But anyone out there, I'm not doing that again. But but It was really lovely.
I can imagine that was
And it came out
that.
the way I wanted, and I was pleased with it. I mean, it worked. It worked, and I learned a lot about it. Yeah. Oh.
I'm gonna zip past these
Yeah.
or that one because we have like 9 minutes left.
Okay.
This always happens. But you also work in monumental scale.
I do. I do. And these are paper cuts that are done in Tyvek. And when I said I had a team that came in and worked with me, my team come in and helped me cut these 12 and 14 feet tall, 48, double 48 on each side pieces that people can walk into. And when I was doing these small lantern size paper cuts, I said, you know what? I want to make it so that people can go be inside of it, and we can all be inside of the magic world of the light and dark. And then I put my story on the side. This piece is called Man Down, and it's all about kind of like the moment we're in right now, where people are witnessing with their cell phone. There are sounds like snapshot. You do that with your phone, the trigger, the shot, all of those sounds I've got cut into this piece, and my 5 cutters or 6 cutters would come, and you see the parts all around and the border, they help cut those. So I just give the credit. I mean, I could not have done these without, my cutters, whether it's Peggy Allen Jackson, Chieko Phillips, Lonnie Lewis, it's Anise, it's all the people who have come to cut with me and to help make it happen.
That's incredible. And so your choice of Tyvek is the stuff you wrap a house with, right?
It is. It's you wrap a house with, and people come in and they're like, oh, it's so gentle. I said, you take this and you just throw it across.
Wow. Was there I mean, besides the weather resistance, are you intentionally, I mean, I think of Tyvek because when I see a new house go up, that's what they wrap a house with. So are you referencing a house with that? Or am I just going too deep with it?
No, I'm just actually, you see the side on the side there, you can walk inside of it and you can stand inside of it, and it's translucent and it casts shadows when you put the light inside. So I'm trying to have the piece live in several different incarnations in its physical self, and then in the shadows that are created by virtue, again, of the light that I introduce. So here's a piece right here, that I cut, and it looks very gentle, but you could tear it, but it takes a lot.
Yeah. I, as I do every single week, am running out of time. So I do want to show at least your glass vessel. I have this one because I just think it's so beautiful. And I'm really glad that you explained at the beginning of how you blasted this. You etched it yourself. And then, yeah, it's just, these are absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, those are the ones that I did. I actually did the vessel was at Seattle Tacoma Glass Museum, and then I made the flames that you see that are inside of this one, and those were done at Pilchuck, and I sort of made them on the idea of a kind of like a perfume bottle where you have this thing in the top. And it turns out to be fire, and so yeah, that was one of the pieces, and I still like it. Thank you for showing it.
Yeah, it's stunning, absolutely stunning. And these are, I think we have fast forwarded to your current work.
This is called this Holding Fire, and she's right over here, holding
beautiful
fire. Cut, yeah, and that was my model was a friend, Lonnie Lewis, for this one.
It's amazing, and there's looks like there's different creatures, different.
She's holding the people that are kind of falling from the house and are falling into her hands, and that are holding onto her as she holds them in her hands. and they kind of go down and make the shape of and become the pattern in her skirt. Sort of the connection.
Yeah, for sure. Let me jump over to the Q&A. So I have a couple.
I saw that I had a friend here, Charlotte Sherman. I wanted to say hello to her. I saw her name pop up. Hello, Charlotte.
Jose Cruz has a couple questions for you. He wants to know, have you ever thought about using lights and colored glass rotating behind your cutouts to create different dimensions? So I'm assuming he means the glass and lights that are in constant motion. That's my assumption.
Well, I have sort of an idea that I'm going to do for the show that I'm going to have at the Henry. Actually, that show is going to be with a really good friend and artist, Derek Adams. That'll happen next, it's going to be September 2021 now, and building kind of like a zoetrope where it kind of pivots and reflects the images out into the wall. So that's about as far as I've gone. You know, I'm not a techie at all. So I try to make my constructions and the things I do be as simple for me as possible, because I always feel like if it's too complicated and if I step out of the room, I can't explain to people how to make it work again. So I usually have a light somewhere, you can switch it off and on. And then I try to work with the simplicity of that and have the complication or the things that are going to have subtleties happen because of the way I've cut and not because of the way the media is working.
That definitely makes sense. And it seems like it also connects with your, also with your desire to stay, to be the one who's in control of the medium.
Yeah.
And I guess I just jumped ahead, which is good.
This is my it's gonna be from my series I call my men in waiting.
And this series is slated to open where?
Well, it's you know, this will be at Claire's, but I decided a while ago that, you know, I do these images and I have these ideas, and I just decide they mean more to me when I use people that I actually know as the people in my pieces. And so the person that's in this piece right here, his actual name is Brian, and he was actually my assistant director when I was at NAMM. And I thought, you know, he is what I am making this world for. He and all the people that are around me, they're what I want to have the success be for. And if I can sort of conjure and make that real for my own mind, sort of cutting them into my life, make it feel more real for me. And then other people will see them. They won't know that story, but they'll see the beauty of the effort, and maybe they'll fall in love with it too in their own way. So that's part of it. So I've got lots of people that I'm getting ready to entrap in my magic and be my men in waiting. They will be my men in waiting. Maybe you'll be one of my men in waiting. And not that you're waiting, but in fact, I feel that you're ready for the world. You know, the world is ready for you, and there's nothing that people need be fear of. In fact, they're going to be so happy to have you because, you know, and I'm just sort of introducing.
Oh my gosh, that is so right on time. You know, right at this moment. That's what's so needed.
Yeah. So that's lovely for me.
That's awesome. What else do you have coming up next?
Well, my upcoming show is with the Seattle Art Museum, and it's you know, the Geography of Innocence, and that the piece that's behind me is going to be part of that show, and it opens, I think, mid-November. You know, if all things go well. My next show will be September in 2021 with the Henry Gallery, again with Derek Adams. We're doing a show called Packaged Black, and it's kind of about fashion and clothing and how you face the world, you know, and you're the princess. And I have work going up in Portland right now, a huge public project that's with their new Multnomah County Courthouse that's going up right now. And so that's happening. And I just feel fortunate. I feel fortunate. I feel like here I am in my studio, I'm confined, and it's been tough like it is with everyone else, but I've been able to sit with the work, and the work has gotten better because I've had to sit with it. And you know, so my complaints have to be fewer than how they feel to me.
Yeah, for sure. I know it is really hard to feel trapped in your studio, and it's awesome that you're still working.
Oh yeah.
You know, a lot of the artists that I've been speaking to are just like, I can't until I can get back out into the world. I can't work right now. But you know, it seems like that's something that you kind of demand of yourself and always have.
Well, I have to, when I think again, I talk about my parents and my family and where they came from and what they did prior to getting here. They worked from sun up to sundown. All I have to do is work 8 hours a day. I could do that.
Right.
You know? And they did that so I could do this. So, you know, I'm not going to, you know, I want to complain, and I do complain, and some days I cry, and some days I'm just like, oh my God, you know, if this is it, where's the pill? Let me take it. But, you know, we're in a situation now where, you know, I can't complain to someone else because we're all in the same boat. So there you go. Are there other questions? I love it. Yeah.
There is someone is interested to know if you would ever do a book illustration like Bible stories or poetry.
Well, I actually haven't ever done an actual illustration of a book, but my work's been in books, and they've been in books related to, you know, the stories I've written about or things I've written about. And I'm not really an illustrator in that way, but I feel like my work tells a story, and you know, maybe that'll come. I don't know. It just hasn't happened. So it's not a project I gin up for myself right now.
Sure. Yeah, it seems like you have a lot of projects in the work that you know that you've committed to. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a really awesome conversation.
Well, I thank you for having me, and I thank Claire for putting us together. And thank you guys for all of the work that you're doing there, and everyone who came today to be part of the conversation, people I know, people I don't know. And I hope that at some point we'll all be in the same room together. And Dimitri, if you're in Seattle, you know, come see me.
I will make a trip.
Sade. And Jose, thank you for your questions, and all the people that are out there.
Thanks everyone. And thanks again, Barbara. Everyone, please check out in the chat box today has posted all of Barbara's, her website, also Claire's website, and then some links to the upcoming show. So definitely check those out. And I did not get into the entire breadth and depth of your work, so folks can definitely go check that out. There's so much we couldn't cover that I think just is delightful, and people should check it out. I want to remind folks that this conversation will be available on Museum of the African Diaspora's YouTube channel. So if you came in late, you can go back and you can see the entirety of the conversation, as well as our previous conversations. And we'll see you again.
Oh my God.
It will be there, part of the archive. And then also I invite folks to join us next Wednesday at 1:00 p.m. Pacific Standard Time when we speak with Erica Demon. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful one. And I'm definitely want to come up and see you.
Well, we'll talk. Ciao.
Yes. Ciao.